That's nice. Yeah, it was good. Face was quite nice. Just got a message on the weekend. Oh, cool. She was really good with the details.
Oh, there you go.
Hear ye, hear ye. I think we need a new bell. Put the hat
I
round.
thought you were going to say new town crier.
All right. Lena, and welcome to today's information session. We start a reminder, this workshop is being live streamed. However, while this is open to the public, it's for staff to provide guidance to elected members, and it's not a forum for debate or decisions. It's also not a forum for the public to provide input into decisions or to bring other matters to our attention. If a member of the public does want to provide input, please talk to staff and happily help you to have your say. I've got an apology this morning from Tyrone Fields and partial absence from Yanni. So I would like to welcome first off Warwick Lamb and Joe Daly to speak to us about the 2025 local elections and elected member protocols. So, and just in case some of you didn't realise it is election year this year, so this is go.
Indeed. Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Pauline. First name terms here, if that's okay.
That's fine.
Like your bell, could do with one of those.
Oh, it's not very good actually. You can have it.
Come in handy sometimes.
Unless we get a new one.
Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone. We're just here to run through a session on elected member protocols. It'll probably take maximum an hour. To take questions as we go.
Before what you wish for.
No, we'll go through the presentation and then we'll have time for questions.
Okay, that's fine.
Yep. Thank you. We've got an hour for this.
Yeah. I'll take that long, but we'll see how we go.
That's fine. Yeah. So you fire away and take control of the briefing. And
many of you, most of you have been through this process before. Am I able just to do a quick run around the room and grab a name and just how many terms you've been on council for?
Yeah, he's going to be here. So
okay. So Celeste, we'll start with you.
Hi, I'm Celeste. Sorry. I'm Celeste. I'm the councillor of the Coastal Ward, and this will be my third election in 4 years.
Okay. Right.
That's special.
Riddle me that.
Do you want to explain that?
Oh, sorry, there was a by-election, and then I got elected, and I had to.
Okay.
I'm still figuring out the election protocols, but
Okay, well, that's what we're here for. So, right.
Mark Peters, I'm first term on council for Hornby.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Thanks, mate.
Kia ora. I'm Tyler. I'm representing the Riccarton Ward, and it's my first term.
Okay, thanks, Tyler.
I'm Sarah and first elected to Community Board 2013, elected to Council 2016. I'm retiring from Council this time but standing for Mayor.
Okay, thanks, Sarah.
Kia ora, I'm Melanie Coker. I'm the councillor for Spraydon. This is my 5th elections, 2 terms Community Board, 2 terms council.
Hi, I'm Sam McDonald. This is my 2nd term on council and I did a term on the community board before that.
Okay.
Kia ora, Pauline Cotter, first elected to council 2013, did 2 terms on community board prior to that.
Good morning, James Goff. First elected to community board in 2007, and this is I'm the old man at the table. And had 5 terms on council. This is my 5th.
James.
Kia ora, I'm Victoria Henstock. This is my first term as assistant councillor and I have not previously done a community board.
you know, I'm Tim. I'm 4th term. I did 2 terms on community board, and
Okay. Kelly Barber, I'm the Burwood councillor. This is my first term as a councillor, but I served as the chair of the community board in the term before that.
morning, Jake McClellan. This is my 2nd term as a city councillor, and I did 1 term on the community board in starting 2016.
Thanks, Jake.
And I'm Aaron Kew, City Councillor for Hewitt, done a couple of terms on the community board and also health board for a few terms. Just
RIP.
yes, RIP. But you worked at all of the health board elections. So, yeah, he used to ring me regularly for all my breaches. Yes, yeah, Joe rings me, so right, so I'll just give you my number now.
Thanks, Sarah. Thanks for
Oh,
reminding me of that.
learning.
All right, well, thanks for that. So, yeah, good mix around the table. A few of you are here first timers as incumbents. So this is really what we want to talk about, the elected member protocols that affect that. Got about 20 slides to go through. I'll skip through some of them real quick. The first 3 or 4 are about the protocols, the key stuff, and then there's a few slides after that just to remind you about a few election things that are happening in election land for the election, just so that we're all on the same page. So as you know, it's my name. Work for a company called elections.com. Here behind me we've got Steve Kilpatrick, our Managing Director. Steve over here. We're based in Christchurch and have our premise out by the airport. All of the votes for all our councils go to. So we work for 47 councils. We're election officer for 44. And we process about 850,000 voting papers during the voting period out here from all around the country. Basically did the elections from Tauranga south, pretty much. I've been around elections a long time, playing elections since 1986. So I'm a bit old school, around the block a bit. I've done probably 900 council elections. Some of you came to the candidate briefing a few weeks ago, where I think I've done that presentation 250 times, and I've done this session about it's probably 100. So the things that I say today are the things that I say to all of our councils. As I said, I'm a bit old school. My language is a bit colloquial, and I've got a pretty good Porky's radar. So when I'm dealing with candidates and electors, I like people to be straight up with me because they're going to get a straight back, as Aaron knows. That's really me in a nutshell. Of course, you know Joe. Been around elections a long time as well. So Joe's looking at nuts and bolts on the ground, and will be the first port of call for things as they normally are. And then Mary, where Mary sits, Mary under the Act is responsible for the columns around participation and the raising the awareness of the election process.
I just had a message from Councillor Yanni Johansson. See, 2007 to council?
Yeah, it's 2007.
The only person who's done more elections than Warwick.
I think community board
James.
2001 he was, so.
Yeah, we know
And
Yanni.
I can hear everything you guys say.
You know Yanni.
Yeah, we know Yanni from way back.
You know
So
Yanni.
this slide here is the key one that I'm keen for you to lock away. Joe, this presentation has gone to run. We will go to.
Yep.
Yep, you all got it?
Yep.
Yeah, so make sure you're familiar with all these dates and lock them away. As you know, nominations opening 4th of July, which happens to be an important day in the rest of the world. Which did escape me at the time, Independence Day, of course. And then closing nominations Friday, the 1st of August, 12 o'clock, not 12:01. We'll talk a bit about that later. And then the voting period starting 9 September. So yeah, get those in your memory. There's a few things that are note that has changed a little bit from last time. Got this session here today, got a lot more voting bins around the community. We'll talk about it a bit later. The voting bins have become the way to go these days because we know that the postal system is turned to custard. and also candidate videos we will be providing this time. So we'll talk a little bit about that later. The rest of the stuff there is pretty straightforward. We are doing some research as well after the election, some information from the Electoral Commission to help us analyse demographics, voting stats at the same time. So yeah, candidate videos. So this time after the closed nominations, many councils around the country, pioneered by Tauranga City last time, their election last year, we'll be doing candidate videos of candidates. Same thing will apply here. If you want to have a look at how that works, go to the Tauranga City Council website. They've got the videos up there of members that they did when they did this process. Level playing field deal, so organised by the council, in the council premise, same lighting, same sound, same environment, same questions. 4 generic type questions, like, and it won't be exactly this, but like, why are you standing? What skills do you bring to the role? What 3 things do you want to focus on for the next 3 years, council? And what are the challenges in front of council? Sort of just generic questions like that, that everyone can speak to and deal to from there. Once nominations are closed, Joe will contact everyone and provide everyone, all candidates, with those questions and the time frame and how that will work, booking system and all that. It'll be 90 seconds, pretty short and sharp. So, 15, 20 seconds per question. Get a couple of goes, and if you don't quite get it right, then you'll get another crack at it. But all about level playing field.
I'm assuming that you can opt out.
Absolutely, it's completely optional. In Tauranga's case, they had 75 candidates. They had 66 that did their video straight up. Once they were put up on the council website, there were 6 others that went, oh, that's better than we thought. It's a good idea. Can you come in and do ours? So they did, and they sorted that out. Including one person who came in and did it with a week. So they got lots of questions from people saying, where's your video? But entirely optional. Okay. So as I say, if you get the chance, do go to that Tauranga City Council site and check that out. I'll give you a good feel for how it looks. The questions have captions. So it's not as if someone's asking the question. The words of the question will appear in the top corner. Then the candidate's answer will have subtitles underneath. So easy for voters to look at and see and read and listen to. Key thing being that it's another method for electors to find out what candidates are like, and from our experience, videos are a good opportunity for people to see that. All right, let's delve into the protocols. This is really why we're here. I know there's quite a lot of words on these slides. I'm not going to read every word on every slide. It's not going to be death by PowerPoint. I just want to go through the key points. So really, when it comes to elected member protocols, what I want you to think about is keeping your campaigning self separate from your BAU self. And the simple principle is easy as that. When you're doing your council BAU stuff, you're going to meetings as you would normally do, or events, you're there as an elected member with your elected member hat on, not there as an opportunity to campaign. And to campaign, I mean doing a call to action. So when I talk about campaigning, I'm talking about a call to action. Talking about yourself and saying, I would like you to vote for me. That's a call to action. As an elected member, doing your normal job, going to events, no problem. If you're at an event and someone comes up to you and says, look, I see you're standing for council again, what's your view on this and why should I vote for you? I want you to say, thanks, but this is not the place and time for me to be talking about campaigning. Let's take that offline, I'll talk to you later. Sometimes that's not very easy to do. shades grey, you might get asked questions that might lead into campaigning type. I just want you to use your common sense and go, is this really leading down a campaigning path? Yep, okay, let's stop that and we'll deal with that later. Because you're there as an elected member. This is all about you as an elected member not getting an advantage by being an elected member at an event that someone who's not an elected member wouldn't otherwise have. Okay. You've got to have access to information as you normally would in your normal process, but I want you to be mindful of making a whole lot of extra election, information requests that might be election related out of the ordinary for what you would normally do in your day-to-day job. Sorry, huh?
I know, well, just 2 questions at the end because it's got quite a few sides. Do you mind, Aaron? Save it up.
You'll get a call later anyway.
It's fine.
So during this 3 months period, so the election period, 11 July to 11th of October, so this is the period that we're talking about here, 11 July to 11th of October, 3 months. Council comms quite often will dial back on photo opportunities and speaking slots and for different things and media releases and so forth, so as not to give candidates more prominence, elected members more prominence than would otherwise be the case. But, BAU has to continue. Your normal job as an elected member continues. So we put all that in the mix and take that into account when we're doing all these things. So yeah, having a balance between BAU and campaigning. Come to that. So council resources can't be used for electioneering purposes.
What?
Sometimes easier said than done.
Yes.
Council staff can't be used for your campaigning purposes. No council staff can help you with your campaign. Common sense. Sometimes, as we know, in elections, common sense can jump out the window. Can't use council taken photos in your campaigning. Can't use the photos that are on council's website taken of you when you became elected member for your campaigning purposes. They're council resource. I want you to, when you are doing your campaigning, not to use your CCC email address. Now, sometimes that's easier said than done, but if someone sends you an email to your CCC email address and it's a campaigning issue and you're responding with a call to action, I want you to switch that to your personal account and send it. So remember, in that case, it's not about what you're doing, it's about what is the person seeing who is receiving it. If they're seeing that it's coming from your personal account, it's okay. If they're seeing that it's coming from your CCC account, not so much. Council resources, email address, council resource. Can't come along to a council meeting here, which has been live streamed, wearing a Vote For Me t-shirt or a cap. Or have someone sitting in the back row here holding up a sign saying, vote for me. Sign down. Because that goes out on council's live stream to council's social media audience, not the candidate's social media audience. Council's social media channel, not candidate's social media channel. Okay. Sense. But bear those things in mind when it comes to campaigning time. Remember, campaigning can start anytime. Restrictions on timeframes. But the election period, 11 July, 11th of October. Here's a shot of Mayor's car. Anybody know where that is? this was in the media a few years back, was the mayor of Horowhenua who was standing again. So Michael had a car park underneath the council building, which is that building right behind it, where he could park his car every day. And when campaigning time came around, he then parked his car right outside the front door. Council resource.
Cleverly worded though, isn't it?
Yeah. It's authorised, got an organisation on the back, which is great. So I said to Michael he couldn't park there because he was using council resources for his campaigning purposes. So just park it in the street, down the road somewhere, not in the council car park right outside the door where everybody going past can see it. Common sense stuff. But that reminds me a bit about, you know, what you guys can do here. First things first, with cars that are sign written, I know some of you have got cars that you drive around in as your normal business as a councillor. That's okay. If it's not a call to action, there's no campaigning on it, no problem. Yeah. If it is a call to action car, you eventually sign right it saying, vote for me, then just be mindful of where you might park that. If you're coming to an event like this, a council meeting, you've probably got a council car park out the back or, you know, somewhere around behind the building that's not in obvious public view. It's okay. Just don't want you to do this and park it right outside the front door. And when you're at a service centre or council facility with your cafe and you're using that as a private citizen, not on council business, but are there all day, then I don't want you to be parking it right outside the front door. That can be seen as a campaigning item because it is a council resource. Sure, park it in the street, down the road. It's not a council car park in full view like this one outside the door. I might have a few questions about it later, so happy to talk about it a bit more. So social media, sometimes shades of grey, can be a bit tricky. Remember, council social media audience is council's social media audience, not elected members, not candidates. Council social media is monitored and checked, and any campaigning messages or comments will be zapped. I have quite a few of my councillors that during the election period turn off comments on all of their posts to stop the opportunity for campaigning comments coming from electors or candidates or anyone else. Up to council whether they do that. Some of my councillors do that. But anyone who does make a comment on council's social media channel about a candidate will be summarily deleted. If a candidate was doing that, then you'd eventually have to make Grumpy Warwick on the phone. And if you continue to do it, then you would be blocked. So it's council's social media audience, not a candidate's social media audience. It's common sense. And, you know, same deal during the election period, council channel will unlike all those, whatever those words mean, any candidates on social media channels. Standard stuff. You can take a council post and send it to your audience with a campaign message if you want to. You know, if it's a post about something you've been involved in, you can send it to your network saying, I was involved in this. Fantastic I am. Please vote for me. It's okay. I just don't want you to do anything back on council's channel. So no rating, reviewing, liking, sharing, tagging in council. That then appears on council's feed. So you can take it, go to your audience, just don't go back. Simple principle. Pretty straightforward, because council's social media audience is council's social media audience. Okay, make sense? Remember that it's illegal to post a photo of a completed voting paper on Facebook or on Instagram. You can take a photo of your completed voting paper and a snip of just your name with your circle and a tick in it and post that. It's okay. You just can't take it showing other candidates without a tick in it, because that looks like an imitation voting paper, which is against the legislation and would result in me passing that to the police. So we don't want to go there. So, you know, what's the big deal about this? What happens if you did breach these guidelines? Remember, they have guidelines, they have protocols, they're not legislation. It's more about, you know, a level playing field for everyone. And then would that pass a front page test if that was on the front page of the paper saying an elected member used council resources for campaigning? Might not be the place where you want to be. Maybe a code of conduct thing might be something that I end up passing to the police. But it's more about a level playing field and integrity of the election process. Those are the things that I just want you to bear in mind and think about when you're doing your call to action campaign. BAU stuff, which continues, but call to action. Okay, so that's the protocols dealt to. I'll now do just a few other slides about some other bits and pieces, just so that you're all on the same page when it comes to the election deal. So a few changes since last time. You'll know that voting period has been increased by 10 days. It used to be 22.5 days, now 32.5, with a longer period for when voting papers can be delivered. Will start to be delivered by DX and New Zealand Post from Tuesday the 9th of September, but they'll take a bit longer. That means that it's basically a month when voting papers. There are many of my councils that have got Māori ward polls and Māori wards, which is affected by the Māori electoral option, where people can change roles between general and Māori up until the 10th of July, but it doesn't affect what you guys are doing here. The voting period is a few days shorter. So since then, the DX now actively in the market, and they will be doing council elections. They are our main provider for all of our councils. So they'll be doing probably about half voting paper deliveries in Christchurch. Slight change to recounts and ties has happened in the legislation. It's not a big drama, but effectively that if there's a tie when we release the official result, it used to be that those two candidates would pull their name out of a hat, and that would be the person elected. Now, at the moment there's a tie, it immediately goes to a district court judge for a judicial recount. Okay. And we are able to provide telephone dictation.
If that's tied, Warren?
Right.
If that's tied?
If that's tied,
Yes.
then a judge would do the pull out of a hat. Could happen. We are able to provide a telephone dictation service this time, which the Electoral Commission have done for parliamentary elections the last couple of times. It's not a big service. It's to the disability sector for those who are physically unable to complete their voting papers by themselves, visually impaired or physically impaired. They can ring us and we'll go through a dictation service to record their vote. Across the country last time, there was about 900 people that did this. So it's not a massive number, And it's not something that we're probably advertise a lot, it's a soft launch to the disability sector. Possible. As you know, these elections you've got, those that came to candidate briefing, seen the candidate briefing presentation, you've got some more details around this. That's what they are. There's the number of electors on the roll as at last week, 288,000. And remember, everyone's names in the voting documents are in random order. So voting papers in your house, you and your partner will be different order. You will know this process, but a couple of reminders. Remember, got to be a New Zealand citizen, as you are. Got to be on the roll. You can stand anywhere. 2 people nominating you, got to be in the ward or the community board or the area that you're standing. And just remember about the 25,000 limit thing, that if that's the case, then you've got to get approval from the Auditor General. Nominations close. What time? Midday, Friday, 1 August, not 12:01. So please do not leave lodging your nomination till the last minute. Secondly, saying that, one thing that be mindful of that if you are sending it in electronically, 85% of our candidates across the country do that. Are sending it in by email and are doing it at the last minute. Be careful, because it's not the time that you send it that matters, it's the time Joe receives it in their inbox. Do what someone did in Tauranga last year and send a nomination in at 11:58, thinking that was all okay. No, cybersecurity, email servers, all that stuff. You know, when you send an email, it doesn't appear straight away sometimes. It can take a few minutes. That person's email turned up at 12:01. Too late. Not a candidate. Not the time you send it, the time that Joe receives it. Okay, happy with that?
Yes, and we have had people miss out for exactly that reason before. Didn't send everything with their email and arrived 11:59, but didn't have all the information required.
Will you turn on a receipt then, like message around that time, so people are aware, like get confirmation that it's been received?
Can't recall if we did that, but I'll make a note.
Trust you to be planning for this exact scenario.
Well, I'll tell you, we contacted the candidate very quickly after 12 o'clock and it was absolutely nothing. They listened to our, it's definitely the key message.
It is the candidate's responsibility to make sure that it's received in time. If you send an email on the last morning and haven't heard back, a few minutes, get on the phone, ring up, say, Joe, have you received my email?
But you can turn on those receipts. I just sort of thought that given this, it could be quite useful. Sometimes people have sent emails and it hasn't gone through. But if you've got a receipt, then you don't need to be bombarding people with phone calls, just confirming that it went through.
Yeah, but these things are quite important. So it's not necessarily about whether it's been received, about whether it's correct. So you know, take the time to check that has it been received and is it okay? Has it got everything? Is my nominator on the roll, for example?
Yeah, no, totally appreciate that.
So just be mindful, 11:59, 59 plus 1. If you're inside the front door of the building when Joe is listening to the pips on the national program at midday, that's okay. If you're not, too late.
Inside the door of the electoral office.
Of the electoral office, correct. Just a couple of questions, a couple of notes about profiles. You guys all know this, but pretty straightforward. 150 words about you and what you're standing for, not about someone else, not about Mary as a CE, not about the electoral officer. English and or today, 150 words max. We check this to the nth degree, not 151. Today has to be substantially the same. We check that. There's someone on our team who's fluent in today, check that.
Sorry, Jamie jumped in, but
Passport size colour photo taken within the last 12 months. Not taken by the council. Remember, last 12 months taken by you for your candidate profile statement. You can use any photo in your campaigning, your signs and your billboards from 20 years ago if you want to. Photoshopped, whatever you like. But for your profile statement taken in the last 12 months.
Reach the ASA, though, right?
Remember, no hats, no sunglasses, no pets, no trees, no other people, parrots, nothing unusual. Nice, simple, head and shoulders shot taken against a nice clear background. You can smile, it's not a passport photo. Don't have to look like a drug dealer. Nice, easy head and shoulders shot.
could if you wanted to.
Yeah, some awards, that's probably.
What you said, that's what.
So it's your campaign.
Remember, you can have an affiliation, slogan, tagline, can be pretty much anything. All sorts of different ones out there. 38 characters max, space is a character. So I'll deal with results. We'll have the result due probably about 2 o'clock on election day. Won't include votes popped in the orange voting bins on the Saturday morning, so Joe will get those to us in the afternoon and then produce the prelim result either later that night or first thing on the Sunday morning, depending on when we get them and how many there are. Probably be the Sunday, and then the final result on the Thursday, a few days later, maybe the Wednesday, depending on how special votes get processed. Remember, results can change, as they have done before. Close is close, is what it is. A couple of reminders about donations and expenses. Won't dwell on this for too long, but you've got to record the donations for your campaign, even if you received them last year. Time on donations, if someone's giving you money for your campaign, you've got to record it. Can it be anonymous? Not if you know who it's from. If you know who it is, or you could reasonably work it out from your bank account, you have to declare who it's from. And you've got to keep records of your donations and expenses. The receipts and everything, but you need to know. Pretty straightforward, this stuff. Remember, the cost of the wood that holds up signs is not an election expense, nor are the screws that attach to it. But the cost of the sign is just the same as the cost of your candidate profile statement photo that you take and put in with your nominations, not an election expense. And these returns go on council's website for 7 years. Everyone will have a look at them. So make sure you are correct. Signs. I love signs. Not. The mission, as we all know. Sorry?
Hang on, don't jump the gun.
Physical signs.
Yeah.
Physical signs.
Yeah.
Billboards. 9 weeks before election. Before the start of voting. So 8th of July. I deal with 47 councils. I've got 47 different hoardings policies. They're all over the shop. Some are 3 months, some are 2 months, some are 6 weeks, some are 9 weeks before voting starts. Some come down the day before, some come down the day after, some the week after. That's what it is. You know the rules for Christchurch in the candidate handbook. Make sure you get that right. Remember, every piece of campaign material, has got to have that little authorization statement on it. By candidate, your agent, and contact method, not your physical address. Physical address and the candidate contact details You don't need to put them in your authorization statement. Okay.
Right, into questions, and we've
Yeah.
got 20 minutes.
Yeah.
I've got Aaron, Tyler, Jake, Tim, Sarah, Mel, Celeste and James.
Many
Fire
were-
away, Aaron, so let's make
Oh,
it
mine
snappy.
was relevant to back then, so it doesn't really matter now. It's good.
All good? Tyler?
Good work. For information requests, was I right in thinking that the other candidates get access to that same information?
So if it's a Lagoima,
Yeah.
then that's going to go on council's website and be sent to all candidates,
Okay,
available to all candidates.
so what if there's a CSR or like a request from a citizen that needs help, and I'm asking for information based on that?
If it's an election related question, then that's when it would go to everyone. Be
Gotcha.
available.
And who defines whether it is or not?
Probably Joe and I guess, at some point.
Or through the Goima team and potentially Mary
Okay,
with regard to making those calls.
cool.
You mentioned to be careful about how many requests are being submitted. It's inherent just with the increase in attention and thought that more requests come for what I would call electorate or constituent servicing, you know, party tax or whatever minor thing. We can't control that. That's, I'm assuming that's kind of expected.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I'm just, putting it out there that don't go overboard asking a truckload of what may be relatively minor information requests that take a lot of effort for the council staff to deal to that would otherwise not be the case. But if it's to it,
And ECAN, are they going to do the videos as well?
you can do the videos, yeah. Pretty much most councils will be doing.
With the 150 words, if you got yours translated to Te Reo and you put both English and Te Reo up, what happens when the Te Reo, I don't know, I have no idea the thought of it, that if it exceeded 150 character or the words,
Can't.
so you would have to trim
So-
your Te Reo
so
or
you-
your English to.
Yeah, so you're right. As we all know, when you translate English to Te Reo, it's usually more words in Te Reo.
Yeah.
So that's why I say that the legislation says that it has to be substantially the same. So that means you can't be more than 150 words in Te Reo, so you can trim it so that it fits, but therefore it might be slightly different to the English. That's okay. Make it work.
Sarah?
Thank you. In previous elections, because of the postal service being quite slow, we've ended up having like a date where everyone's gone, New Zealand Post or whoever have gone, you've got to get it in the post box by this date. Do we know what that date is yet? Because that's
Tuesday.
not on
Tuesday of the last week, which is what, the
7th.
7th. So that'll still be in place, and that message will be on the back of the return envelopes.
Okay.
And in our candidate, the voting guide. But remember, the orange bins shows onto this, there's going to be 70 odd orange voting bins around.
Yeah, which is great.
City?
They're up too, and you can put them in those up to midday.
Absolutely.
That's good.
So we'll be advertising those a lot. We used Tauranga as an example last time. They had 85% of their votes came through the orange bins. So only 15% came through the postal channel. 10% of that, so 15%. 10% of that was through New Zealand Post, 5% was through DX. But of the 85% that was through orange bins, 33% of that came through the 6 big supermarkets at Tauranga. So here we think they'll
Be effective, right?
the supermarkets will be the key place where most of those bins votes will come, because that's where you go to do your daily stuff. So you can advertise that to your groups as much as you like. The list of that will be in the voting guide, the candidate profiles, and it'll be on council's website and will be readily available.
Awesome.
That's great.
We will it be available of the bins.
Before voting starts.
So we've got Mel, Celeste, James and Vic.
Yeah, the voting bans, would the public be able to suggest locations for that? Is that all pre-decided now?
It's been decided now.
Got
Right,
quite a
we-
criteria.
Yeah, we're keen on some ideas, like the issues around them are security, padlocked, chained to a appropriate pole, appendage, best under CCTV. But if there are places that you might suggest that could be good to go, then if we haven't already covered those, we'd want to know. So, let us know. But, yeah, there's going to be a lot of them, so it'll be a good spread around the city.
Sorry, but a couple. You talked about if we go to an event and we can't campaign, which I understand that, but it would be, yeah, if another candidate is there, which they probably will be at most events, they will be, are they able to campaign? Like, is there a dividing line?
Invited specifically as a council.
It depends,
I mean, if it's, yeah, it depends on.
like if it's a campaign meeting, sure, you know, if it's a meet the candidates thing, no problem. But if it's a council event, then no, campaigning shouldn't happen, and the same on the incumbent.
So you're talking about council events.
Council event.
And then with the people who, say someone can't get out to post or put it into an orange voting, you can call up, but is there a way, so they wanted to fill it out, but have someone come collect it through you, is that a possibility? Or who?
No, but anyone can give their sealed completed voting paper to
Son or whatever.
neighbour or a family friend to put in the box if they're comfortable with that.
There's a lot of information about the actual core flute ones, but technology's moved on a bit, and I'm just haven't seen anything.
Yeah, good question. I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of that. That's more of a regulatory enforcement issue. Do you know more about that than me?
Separately resource consented billboards can potentially be outside the time frame. If they put a separate resource consent for that billboard, then it applies with that. Are you meaning with regard to the size and things like that?
No, I'm thinking if people are saying vote for me on a particular billboard.
Yep.
Is that within the rules outside of the election period?
If it's a separately resource consented billboard that has the ability to have election signage within its resource consent, or does not have a restriction against not having election signage, then it can be used.
Right.
It's a little bit of a grey area because our policy is based on the district plan, but those separately resource consented billboards can be a little outside those rules.
So I would take that as effectively a yes. It depends on the site. Check it out with the site owner. It's got.
If you've got any more queries, please just send them
Just
through.
sing it.
Thanks. Those new 90-second videos, one, does that include community board candidates? Cool. And two, who owns the content? Is it elections, council, or the candidate?
Council.
So the respective council will own that content.
Yeah. So it'll go on council's website. You as a candidate you can forward it to whoever you like. You
Share
can link to it, share it. You know. Council resource.
Thank you. Can I return to the sign written cars, please? So if there's no call to action on the car, then in the course of your everyday council business during the election period, you can park wherever.
If you're there on council business, yes, but sometimes shades of grey. If you were at a service centre sitting in a cafe all day, sitting there just doing your business as a person, then I would say no.
So then if
Practical.
there is a call to action subsequently put on the car during the, let's say the voting period, given that our council car park is in the basement, now whether we return back to Civic or whether we're parking in the Arts Centre, can we still park in the basement where we are away from the public with a call to action on our car? Thank you.
When's the car going in for its sign writing?
I have to fix the red bumper first. Thank you.
Mark?
Remember, it's got to be authorised.
Sure.
I run a council corner in my local library.
Sorry, say it again.
I run a council corner session with the public in my library on a hopefully weekly basis as I get there. Is that okay to continue during the
BAU,
Yeah.
provided there's no call to action campaigning.
It's in practice.
Is it on the council facility?
or in a council library?
I've done
Can't
it for
control
years.
what people come.
What are
and
you
talk
doing,
about.
Sam?
So I've done it for years, so.
Up to the election?
During the election.
Well, no, I stopped, I was advised, because Joe advised me if it's front page test, whatever, so I stopped it.
You advised me the other day that I couldn't run continue with my councillor drop-in sessions during the election period.
Passed for our pre-election periods.
Yeah.
That has ceased.
Most councils do stop those during the election.
But we
period.
could run one, sorry, I've hijacked your question slightly, but I could run one in a local cafe. I continue my councillor drop-in sessions on a weekly basis through the election period in a cafe, which is my business as usual.
It's not in a council facility.
Yeah, that's okay, yeah. Remember though, in doing that, you can't say, for what you hear, I'll buy you a cup of coffee if you vote for me.
Oh, yeah.
So there, well, it's
It's
common-
tricky.
it's common sense, but we can't control what people come and talk to us about in the.
Mary, have you got anything you want to add on that?
It is we'll come back with some more advice. The short guides that came out said that it's perfectly okay for council to book a booking room at any other member of the public.
That's right.
So book and pay for a meeting room in a facility that any candidate and any member able to get. I think it is marginal around drop-in sessions and campaigning. So we protection and the protection of the organisation. It's good to apply the Let's Act with restraint around that.
That's right.
I agree with that.
Sarah?
Common sense. I think curtail those activities during that period.
This one's probably a bit more of council bylaw kind of stuff on signage and parking and bits and pieces. In the past, we've always been told, oh, it's a bit of a grey area, we're not quite sure, it's hard to know when people are parking cars or little trailers with signs on them, parking those at the side of the road. And it would be great if we could have like a kind of yes or no at the beginning of the period with campaign signs and things.
The rules are the same as in the past, where signage is attached to a vehicle that increases the size of the vehicle. For example, you've got a normal trailer and you put some extra signage on it that says vote for, that is not permitted. Where the signage is within the size of the vehicle, a trailer with cage, it can be parked for normal purposes on council roads within the bylaws and things like that, but
it's your normal day-to-day processes and stuff though, not like leaving a trailer at the side of the road with the signs on it.
yes.
And then driving off, you can't do that.
Within if it's parked within the bylaws for the time period, and I'm sorry, off the top of my head, I can't tell you what that is, then it's permitted, but it should be used for normal business. So dropping your trailer off on the side of the road outside your house could be realistic, but parking it up.
Very road up or down Pages Road or Bridge Street or Street.
It is, as you've said, it is a reasonably grey area, but if it meets the requirements and it doesn't break a bylaw, then
you have some examples maybe to make it clear, because it is grey, like what would be allowed and what wouldn't be. Just, if you've got election signage on a trailer, if you've got election signage on a trailer that doesn't do that, and you've just left it at the side of the road, can you do that? Can't you? What circumstances? Yeah, it would just be really good because it's been.
It's like a real estate. Do you mean attached to a vehicle or not attached to a vehicle?
Yeah, it seems like it's the form
Attached. Extra
trailer.
trailer.
in whichever. Or just a,
It's a mobile build. Okay, that's the end of the questions and that's the end of.
Yeah,
So thank you very much for coming in, giving us your time and going through that so carefully and clearly. It's very helpful. Thanks, Warwick. Nice to meet you.
Yeah.
Very much. Say more if you.
So we've got a break till 11, so
No, no,
get back
running
here at 5 too, it'd be lovely, thank you.
Welcome back, Phil. It's all right.
Welcome back, Phil. Nice to see you.
Who's that other chair? She was.
Go
great.
away.
Yeah, I know. She was great.
Okay, so we'll that's just a wee bit tied up next door, so we'll get that, oh, here we are. So we'll move into resource management, national direction changes. So we're gonna hear all about it and welcome.
Yeah.
Kia ora. So we're here today to brief on the proposed changes to RM National Direction, but we're also looking forward to a discussion on potential areas of interest for the council submission, and we'll also outline how staff are approaching drafting the submission. Next slide. We do have a clicker, I apologise. We'll test the technology. It's all good.
Never works with it.
So before we get into the detail of the proposed changes, we just wanted to provide an overview of where these changes sit in the broader reforms process. So the proposed changes to national direction are the final part of phase 2. So phase 2 has focused on the targeted changes to the RMA to deliver the government priorities. They were often seen as, well, they were seen as the quick wins. Phase 3, which is the replacement RM legislation, is still anticipated to be released later this year, most likely following the local body elections. But a question that you may have is why are they undertaking consultation on the national direction ahead of those broader reforms to the RM? This is something that we'll discuss later on in this presentation and potentially could be a submission point that we raise. So what are the government consulting on at this stage? They're proposing changes to RM National Direction. National Direction is a term used to describe national policy statements, national environmental standards, and national planning standards. That's a very technical planning jargon, and we will go into detail of what those mean in the next slide. The government is consulting on 3 packages. They're on the right there. Package 1 is infrastructure and development. Package 2 is primary sector. Package 3 is fresh water. It's important to note that across the 3 packages, there are changes to instruments in all 3 of the packages. So that means we need to look at it holistically as well as those individual packages. So packages are just how the government has decided to group the changes. There's also a 4th package going for housing growth. That was set to be released in early June. We're now the 17th of June. I don't think it's been released to date. So we anticipate that that will be released soon. So briefly, what is national direction? As I said, there's 3 under the RMA. So there's the national policy statements, national environmental standards, and the national planning standards. The national policy statements set the direction for council when drafting plans or making decision on resource consents. They do this through prescribing a set of objectives and policies which are matters of national significance. We've put the example there of urban development as an example of a policy statement, but there's various policy statements under the existing RM framework. The next is your national environmental standards, and these are very prescribed standards. We've also put methods or other requirements for environmental matters there. Every council must enforce these standards, and the purpose is to enable that consistent approach nationally.
Just to add, our district plan has objectives, policies and rules. The rules act as triggers. Effectively in that hierarchy of national direction, national policy statements are the policy framework. The standards are the rules. So the national environmental standards are effectively a national set of rules that applies to every council and don't need a plan change to put into every district plan. Those standards, those rules apply regardless.
And the final one is national planning standards. These are set to make plans easier to prepare, understand, and also comply with. The first set of standards set the direction for consistency in the structure form, definitions, and accessibility of the plans.
those standards came in, and there was often quoted over 50 definitions of height across the country, and so those standards seek a consistency in terms of defined terms, but also sorts that the contents page of every district plan looks the same, that the chapters are structured the same. So whether I'm looking at the Wairoa district plan or the unitary plan or Christchurch district plan, the intent was that they looked the same.
I'll pass over to Mark, who's going to run through the details of package 1 and package 2.
So the first package on infrastructure and development is apparent. It's intended to make it easier for councils to plan and deliver infrastructure, and I'll come on to explain what that encapsulates. In the right-hand side, there's various national planning instruments that we've just talked about in general terms that changes are proposed to, or there's new national direction coming. So the first of those is a national policy statement on infrastructure. There's not currently a policy statement on that. That's got the intent of being more enabling of the delivery of infrastructure. Infrastructure captures 3 waters, transport assets, so that's what we commonly think of, but it also captures social infrastructure. So the term social infrastructure is defined in the discussion paper as including hospitals, emergency services, education, defence, corrections, but in the context of what the council administers, parks, resource recovery, waste disposal facilities. And so this framework is seeking to provide a more enabling tool for more enabling policy direction to support those assets. It acknowledges that infrastructure, because of its functional requirements, does need to be in locations that may not otherwise be suitable. For instance, assets that need to be in an area of significance for landscape values, and that recognition of functional or operational needs is proposed. Of note, there's also policy direction about how the effects between infrastructure and adjoining activities is managed. So there's examples of hospitals, for instance, in our residential areas, and that interface between residential and infrastructure can give rise to adverse effects. The policy statement makes it clear that effects like noise, vibration, dust, and visual effects do come with that infrastructure and can't be completely avoided. So the policy direction is, again, to provide that enabling direction that whilst there may be effects that are less of enjoyment to residents living next door, that is the nature of some of those activities that can't be avoided entirely. The second instrument is a national policy statement on renewable energy generation, and that's an existing tool, but the changes are to reduce consenting costs and enable that generation. Wind turbines being a relevant example, and that's come about for examples in the past of wind farms, particularly up north, where there's been significant consent processes that have gone to the courts, and the direction is to give greater weight to this policy direction of enablement over what a district plan might look like. The third one on electricity network activities. So at the moment, there's a national policy statement that's enabling of the national grid. So Transpower's national grid, the transmission lines, there's a set of policies that are enabling of that. This direction, or this proposed change, is to expand that to apply to Orion's network as well. So that Orion would also benefit from enabling policies and rules that would allow for permitted activities, as well as a more enabling framework for what they seek to do on a day-to-day basis. And that would extend to EV charging infrastructure as well. So as an example, that would include development of new distribution lines and cabinets if standards are met, which would be a permitted activity under the National Environmental Standard for electricity network activities. The next one on the list, National Environmental Standard on telecommunication facilities. So poles, cabinets, what's commonly referred to as cell phone towers. The intent is to, again, be more enabling. It's intended to update existing standards for poles, masts, cabinets, but importantly to permit new poles in more areas. So there's currently restrictions on where in the road reserve that poles can be located. The intent is to allow them unrestricted in any part of the road reserve. There's also a proposal to permit them in zones where it's not currently permitted. So notably commercial zones, industrial zones, mixed use zones, that would be permitted as a right. In the road reserve close to residential, the permitted height being proposed as one of two options is 20-metre tall masts, and other standards that would be more enabling. The next one on granny flats, there was a earlier discussion document out, which council made a submission on about permitting granny flats. That proposal from earlier in the year proposed a self-contained unit be permitted up to 70 square metres. That's been, 60 square metres. That's now been increased in this proposed national environmental standard to 70 square metres. In terms of the comparison with what the district plan permits at the moment, across a number of our residential zones, it's permitted to have a minor residential unit, it's called, of 80 square metres or 70 square metres in rural zones. But there are some more enabling standards that come with this national direction, including maximum building coverage of 50%. That's not too, that's same as what has come through in the medium and high density zones for Climate Change 14 as a comparison, but would be an increase in site coverage in a suburban context where we expect that to, because of larger sites existing in a suburban environment, of one house on a large section, there's greater capacity in those locations for granny flats. So I expect that there'll be a greater take up in those locations and therefore a higher site coverage. It's also clear that we can't set rules for outdoor space, glazing, sunlight access, parking and access in respect of granny flats in this proposal. Second to last on the slide is Papakainga. This is new direction and is proposed to be more enabling on different types of Māori land, and is intending to permit up to 10 units on a site within rural, residential and Māori purpose zones, and to also permit some other activities, including commercial uses up to 100 square metres, visitor accommodation, education, health, recreation, marae, Europa. And then the last on the slide is a new national policy statement on natural hazards, which provides for direction on 7 different types of hazards, from flooding, landslips, coastal erosion and inundation, liquefaction, tsunami. It introduces at a national level a risk-based approach to how we manage hazards. That's not new to a Christchurch context. We have a risk-based approach, which effectively means you take a more restrictive approach in areas that are higher risk and consequence, and a more enabling approach in lower risk areas. The national policy statement seeking greater consistency across the country, and the intent is for that to have immediate effect on resource consent decision making, including private plan changes. That is not all. The second package on the primary sector, I'll just briefly cover off the key changes. The first on marine aquaculture, a new national environmental standards, is to make it easier for consent for research and trials for aquaculture, likely only relevant to Akaroa Harbour. There's an existing national environmental standard on commercial forestry. It's proposed to reduce what council has scope to introduce standards for. So at the moment, proposed forestry on the hills of Banks Peninsula is enabled, but council can put in place standards to be more restrictive. They're proposing to remove that discretion for councils, and only in very limited circumstances that council can have standards over and above what the national instrument proposes, and that's in cases of severe risk of erosion or an underlying risk that's been identified. Highly productive land, I'll just skip to the NPS on highly productive land. Key changes to remove, at the moment, class 1, 2 and 3 soils are protected under the existing national policy statement. it's proposed to remove class 3 soils. In a Christchurch context, it won't make a significant, won't have a significant impact because a lot of the soils around the edge of Christchurch are class 1 and 2. Notwithstanding that, we are seeing a number of private plan change requests coming in for residential and industrial development. So we'll continue processing those and consider how they implement the direction on highly land. The government is testing the idea also of defining areas as special agricultural areas. They've specifically mentioned Horowhenua and Pukekohe as areas that warrant protection, even if they're not class 1 and 2 soils. So that's an addition that's coming. And then in the interest of time, there's also greater enablement for quarrying and mining, including within wetlands under various national instruments.
Thanks, Mark, for that.
Wetlands.
So as you can see, there's quite a breadth of change being proposed under package 1 and package 2, and we'll go into package 3 shortly. But what we wanted to touch on is how we intend to focus our submission, given that it's covering a wide range of policy areas. So what we're proposing on the side over there is that we want to take a strategic or system focus. So that's really looking at how do the packages and how do the instruments within the packages work together? Are there any consistency issues, and are there any potential conflicts? We'd also like to look at implementation. So this is really looking at kind of, is it fit for purpose? Are there issues with interpretation? How do councils or staff apply those policies? And yes, time for delivery. And the third one there is what I mentioned earlier, was around how do we transition from the existing RM framework into the new system. So obviously phase 3 is intending to introduce the RM replacement legislation. This national direction is being drafted under the existing system. So staff are still working that through, but just understanding how that will work. The government has signalled that it will be able to transition into the new system, but we just need to do a bit of testing around that. And the fourth point is probably more of a discussion with you around potential areas of interest. So given that the policies are really, they're focusing on a range of differing policy issues, it's understanding what are those potential areas of interest for council. And as Mark has mentioned, there's a number that jump out there as well. So the final package is package 3. And just a point of, just to note, package 1 and package 2, this is the opportunity for consultation, and from there it will result in changes to the relevant instruments. For package 3, what the government are doing is they're taking a two-staged approach to looking at freshwater regulation. So this first phase is the government seeking options around freshwater regulation, in particular to the MPS freshwater management and the NES freshwater. So this is our opportunity in terms of commenting on those differing options and proposals that the government have put forward. They have signalled that they will be coming back later this year with a more detailed exposure draft on this. So the proposals or the options that they're seeking are identified on the slide on the right. There's 9 of them, and I'll explain a couple, well, the areas of potential focus we could look at on the next slide. Sorry. So in terms of potential focus regarding the freshwater regulation, the first is around the multiple objectives. So the government is seeking feedback on whether to replace the MPS FM single objective with new multiple objectives. And there's 4 new objectives in the discussion document that they've put forward. The second is around the rebalancing of Te Mana o Te Wai, and this is a discussion that would like to have with you. So the government, as you can see on this slide, is seeking feedback on 3 options to rebalance Te Mana o Te Wai. Option 1 is to remove the hierarchy obligations and clarify how Te Mana o Te Wai applies. Option 2 is reinstate Te Mana o Te Wai provisions from 2017. And option 3 is remove Te Mana o Te Wai provisions completely. As I mentioned, these are options. And obviously in our submission, there's the ability to put forward alternative options as well. The final point there is to also make is the government is also seeking feedback to when these changes to freshwater regulation should be taking effect. So the question is whether that should be pre the RMA replacement or post the RMA replacement. At the moment, we don't have any indicative views on that. Just to note that there have been a number of changes to freshwater regulation over the last number of years. And I guess from our perspective, it's that enduring, whatever changes are made, you want to ensure that they're enduring. So the final thing to cover off is just in terms of timeframes for the submission. We will be coming back to you on the 8th of July with the draft submission for a discussion on that. Following that information session, we plan to circulate the draft submission. And just to clarify, in terms of our approach to drafting the submission, we intend to do a brief cover letter that summarises key points, to keep that brief and strategic. And then we propose to do 3 differing appendices for each of the packages. That is where we can also address more technical matters around interpretation and things like that. So we want to have a short strategic and then focus on the detail in the appendices. So that's our approach. We will be taking the draft submission to FNP on the 23rd of July for your consideration. And then the submission will need to be lodged, sorry, there's a typo there. It needs to be lodged by Sunday the 27th, but for us that will be Friday the 25th. So those are our proposed timelines. So happy to have them.
And conscious of time today, so we're still in a preparation phase, so any written feedback or comments are welcome and we can seek to reflect that.
That's very good, thank you. I have 4 questions. Pauline?
Yeah. It's very unsettling in my view. Look, I think we've got to bring in that localism view again, and I didn't like that comment you made, removing council's ability to restrict. Particularly, you mentioned forestry, but I'm sure it'll apply to other things. The stock exclusion in wetlands is just shocking. LUC, the class of the soils, that's had an immediate effect, that class 3. Right, so we can't.
Sorry, Mark.
Can't do anything about that.
The class 3 is immediate effect, the removal of the soils.
I'll check that, but
I think it says in the slide, but I think we need to hold on to and protect our versatile soils. We've already lost a lot, and particularly around Preston's, as that was rushed through as an earthquake response by the minister, and that had been previously declined to build there. So there were versatile soils in there. We've got others. But my question too is that, so rebalancing Te Mana o Te Wai, I would go for option 2, reinstate it. But if that was to come through with more relaxed and more liberal permitted discharges, for example, our wastewater treatment plant out there, what they're trying to do is relax the amount of overflows that you can have by up to about 40 times more than we have now. If that was to come into law, would it be a scenario that a government could say, well, Christchurch City Council, your standards are up here, ours are down here, you should not be charging your ratepayer to reach that standard when they only need this standard. Is that a potential outcome of this? Brent?
Potentially, it's more of a conversation with the Commerce Commission when they're looking at value for ratepayers, where you can achieve a standard for a lesser amount, and you may need to go out and consult the public to justify it.
Okay, so that would need to be a question raised in our submission then. And also, then would we have the ability to, restrict that particular restriction? Thanks.
Kia ora, guys. Pauline's actually asked a lot of my questions, but one of the one I wanted to ask about was the granny flats provision. It's more around infrastructure. So for example, they can put a granny flat in, do they still need to apply consent for wastewater,
There's also changes to the Building Act that have come through and proposed, and we've just made a submission on that. I'd have to refer to that.
Yep.
Confusing, doesn't it? Resource consent, building consent.
Yeah, because it will have an effect on the infrastructure that we're able to push out, particularly our wastewater if we get granny flats.
With a high flood hazard area, like some areas are sprayed, and if you were going to do granny flat, you would have to supply, and I'm no, they've got the overflow. Some properties are required to have an overflow tank, so that takes the rainwater and slowly puts it back into the system. So that would be part of it as well.
I'd love to see the provisions in that. Yeah.
Sorry, Caroline, are you talking wastewater or rainwater?
Wastewater.
But rainwater would be exactly the same situation and sprayed in.
So for example, you got Stockburn, which is pretty much well, actually, so we'll talk about Upper Riccarton. It's going right up, right? And there's going to be more wastewater that's going to be going in. But if there are properties that are also going to be adding granny flats, 70 square meters, it's also going to apply more pressure to the wastewater infrastructure.
In any case, at the present time, council has a bylaw and administers connections through that bylaw such that.
So we've got control over that, right? Whether we can permit.
It's just a question of whether the changes to the Building Act and other legislation precludes us from using the bylaw, but okay. I can't foresee that.
So the question offline would be then, do we still have control over allowing these connections under this one or under the Building Act probably? That's probably the question I've got for later.
Thank you. Aaron?
Yeah, so mine was around the wind farms. Does this make it easier or more changes?
Easier.
More enabling.
For the wind farms to come in. Okay, because I know someone who consents, they do the planning and it costs more for to the paperwork than it costs to put in the farm. So this will reduce that.
That's the intent, and the problem in the governance discussion document, the problem described is very much the costly nature of consenting and the inability to get.
Given that we have much in the way of wind turbines around Christchurch, do we have a city position on it?
I mean, we've flagged it, given there's potential in the future that locations on the Max Peninsula may be sought for a wind farm.
Right, or red zone? Yep.
I can't comment on the climatic environment required. But
which is about the easterly, so might as well use it.
Okay. Victoria.
Thank you. Two questions. First on Te Mana Otiwai and the second on the focus of our feedback on packages 1 and 2. So Te Mana Otiwai, how does the Ngātahu freshwater claim play intersect with this, please? In terms of timing, in terms of objective and focus, what's the overlap? What are the challenges with it?
We can't comment on that, but we'll come back to you. What we can say though is we're engaging with Whitiora and Mahanui to get input to the submission. So
it's pretty complex. So the second one is the feedback, focus of our feedback. I note that the draft submission is coming to finance and performance, but there's nothing in slide 9 that talks about where we focus our feedback in relation to financial implications. Yeah, can you talk to that, please?
That is something that we've often covered in our submissions, and we can again look to cover that on from the proposed reforms for council and potentially for ratepayers.
Okay,
as well.
and so you've broken it down in terms of a focus of our feedback on 1 and 2 and then 3. So the financial implications will cover all of our feedback, please, at home.
Yes, yeah.
Thank you.
Timothy?
Two. I'm not sure if one is relevant, but the first one is being able to restrict development in areas of high flood or potentially dangerous from earthquakes, etc. So reading this, I'm presuming it's going to make it easier. And I kind of think back to Napier, where a developer wanted to develop an area. The council really didn't want it to happen, but they couldn't really stop it. It seems to me to be ridiculous that people can develop on areas that are subject to flooding, etc., and it costs the city more. So how this seems to be on the side of developing that type of land, is that correct?
The national policy statement proposed on natural hazards defines what is deemed significant risk and then enables a proportionate response, so a more restrictive approach within areas of significant risk. So it ultimately it still requires a plan change to manage areas that aren't currently managed, and we're advancing a coastal hazards plan change. But we have already got in our district plan areas defined as high risk. We've got a high flood areas deemed at risk of flooding, both within areas affected, areas within the influence of the coast, but also right to the western edge of the city. So we do in our district plan manage risk, manage high risk areas.
Because let's be honest, we've spent hundreds or over $100 million on flood basins purely to stop flooding into the other areas downstream. But that's accentuated by the developments and basically what you describe as natural floodplains. So do we have the ability under this at any point to say no to an area?
This would provide policy support to a plan change that's being advanced. It's not a set of rules per se, it's policy direction, so we still have to implement that through the plan change, but it does, if it goes through in its current form, it will support the approach we're taking. Yeah, sure.
The second one is, if you are looking at the central city, we've got so many 2-bedroom units, it's ridiculous. And if we're trying to get a balance, as it was sold to us after the earthquake, trying to get or like in London. But if you look at those areas, they do have 1, 2, 3, 4, even 5-bedroom family homes and apartments. We have none of that, because as soon as you go to 3 or 4 bedroom in the central city, you're talking million plus. And I know this, I've been not looking for myself, obviously. But how do we go to a process, or are we looking at a process of, say, restricting certain size or bedroom? This would not.
That's really for package 4 of the Housing for Growth direction, which is still to come, and we'll report back separately on that. We'll see what's coming out, but the tone for all of these packages is being more enabling. So we'd have to consider how being more restrictive fits in with that context.
Well, technically, we would be more enabling for 3 and 4 bedroom, 3 plus, but yeah. Okay, look, I look forward to that one. Thank you. This one's been riveting.
Sarah, please.
Thank you. Quick things. Firstly, we've been having a lot of changes that we've been having to make, sort of one after the other. And this one is like a precursor to a larger change. Resource implications for us, not necessarily the cost, but when it comes to the staff time and resource that's being used on that, what is being pushed back to be able to cater for all the additional work?
There's 2 parts to this. The national environmental standards don't require a plan change to come into effect. They will
just
happen. So existing national direction on some of those matters, as well as contaminated land, they're applied like the rules in the district plan, but they sit outside. The policy statements, particularly on natural hazards and other new national policy statements, they would require a plan change to implement that direction. Notwithstanding that national direction also can be considered for any resource consent application. So we may delay a plan change to implement some of this national direction, but it ultimately still had regard to the consent process.
Okay.
We'll report back on in terms of how we need to wait the outcome of this, but we'll report back to you on the resourcing applications. And it really comes down to what is required in these national policy statements in the way of plan changes. So, for instance, the national policy statement on urban development did require us to do a plan change 14 by a certain date. just need to go through the national policy statements and see what is being directed for councils to do a plan change and what's not directed.
Yeah.
For those not directed, there's scope for us to take longer. And to be honest, if we don't want to line up a whole lot of new plan changes to implement this new direction, if ultimately we have to prepare a whole new plan under the proposed legislation.
And for with things where we end up not doing a plan change, but there is that guidance or would it be that the developers do have to follow? Does it make the process more difficult for them because the information's in different places, or?
The national environmental standards, ideally they're integrated into our plan, and we'll review the provisions because some under Section 8 we can directly put it in our plan without a plan change.
Oh, great.
But we'll have to check the detail on that. But even if not, there's still the ability to implement those standards.
And the other one is so go back to like Aaron's point of the wind farms things and everything more enabling. How does this with this one as it stands and with the regulatory standard stuff as it stands, is there a conflict there? So things that making big things more enabling like wind farms, but then with regulatory standards saying, well, if you're going to have an impact on your neighbours, then you're going to have to pay for it. You know, where is the conflict in those two pieces of legislation?
It's something that we've identified that we need to look at, or staff need to look at when preparing the submission, is around those conflicting issues. And that's, I mean, whether that's through differing systems or whether that's through, I guess, the RM system with the differing the range of national direction proposed. But that's certainly on our radar for something to look at, is around those conflicting priorities or competing priorities in some instances.
I can't remember because I read a few days ago that our current submission that's going to council tomorrow standards, because this is new, do we capture that in our current submission on the regulatory standards bill? Okay, so if we could just have a look at that overnight before.
2 points. One about the stock exclusion regulations. Are there, have they given like a rationale for that? It talks about threatened stock species. It seems like, is there such a thing?
We'll need to come back to you on that.
It just seems extremely weird. The other one about the telecommunication facilities and the poles. What are I'd like to know what the current restrictions are, because obviously we have no control over that. You just go through the process. And there are people that get annoyed about them and other people that love them because they can use their Wi-Fi. More than no, effectively, but I mean, could it potentially mean there's a pole every 100 metres around every single street in the entire city?
Yeah, at the moment, the restriction of what can happen in the road reserve, a new mast can, its location is restricted relative to proximity to other poles. But there could be a situation where obviously there's only so many providers, so there's a limit to how many poles you'd have, but there's more flexibility of where the poles could be located in that street. In terms of the comparison between what's allowed at the moment and what's proposed, the height of so in the road reserve adjacent to a residential area, the height of the pole, what's permitted is determined based on the height of any existing poles. I'll come back with a fuller response, but the proposed option is to enable 20 metre high poles as a right without relativity tested.
Thank you. Now, we have 3 more questions, but we're so far over time. If you guys are available to be next door and the 3 people who are asking questions, you don't know who they are, and come and have your answer. Thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay. Morehouse pedestrian improvements. Gemma is here to provide information on pedestrian improvements to Morehouse Ag.
I've got some colleagues with me too. Okay. That's intimidating.
Very brave sitting behind you guys. Yeah, I saw you up too.
right into it. A little presentation and then we'll go to questions. So just to give a quick recap, as part of our kind of levels of service, road safety action plan, we want everyone to get where they're going safely, regardless of how they're travelling. And having safer speeds and infrastructure is part of the solution to a safer network. So the two intersections are a really busy location. They are kind of adjacent to the main Arta City campus, shops, retail, Washington Skate Park. There's a lot of people travelling through here by many different modes. And we do have high numbers of vulnerable users travelling through the intersections as well due to those locations. So very busy spot at the minute. And then also there's plans, I guess, around the area for intensification with Project 8011, Southeast Neighbourhood Plan, and then a stadium just up the road as well. So the current Barbados Waltham Morehouse intersection is a pretty big intersection. There's currently no crossing point on the east side and the slip lane is uncontrolled, which means people have to wait for their turn to cross through the traffic when they're turning left from Morehouse into Waltham Road. Overall, the intersection is ranked number 7 amongst over 5,000 intersections in the Christchurch district. So the proposal has been to install a staggered crossing on the east side of the intersection and to provide some priority for people crossing the slip lane. And as per best practice, a small speed hump's been proposed in front of the zebra crossing to make sure that drivers are slowing down to make sure that they stop before that zebra crossing. So there's no other vertical traffic calming features in the plan. It's just the speed humps in advance of the priority crossing point. At Gus and Madras Morehouse, pretty similar. It's a huge big intersection. We know students like to frequent the fast food establishment on the southeast corner, and there's also busy with other people traveling both north and south in the morning peaks. At the intersection, overall it's ranked number 23 in the big list of intersections. And I guess the biggest issue at this intersection is the small traffic island on the northwest corner where we ask people to wait before they cross the slip lane, but also before they get to cross the intersection. And sometimes that can be a wait of up to 120 seconds, just with trying to get all the traffic through on Morehouse Ave and on Gasson Street. So the proposal is to install again a crossing on the east side of the intersection. The slip lanes on the south side would be retained with priority crossings for pedestrians, but also again with just the small speed humps in advance of those zebra crossings. And then I guess the bigger part of the proposal was to remove the slip lane on the northwest corner and signalise the left turn, so pedestrians have a kind of a large waiting area on the corner, and the left turn would, just go with other traffic on the green signal. So we did some consultation in April. That feedback has now been evaluated, and we're here today at the council briefing. And I'll pass over to Kieran to run through the consultation feedback.
Thank you. So consultation, we received a good amount of feedback from the public, 191 formal submissions. You can see the breakdown on screen as well as quick poll responses, which is our quick feedback to lower barriers to engagement. We've also got a very good amount of feedback from local organisations as well as the bordering community board, since this area is on the border of Papua Central, Spring, Keshner, Heathcote. In terms of the consistent supportive themes among organisations, it was really important to them that we prioritised pedestrians and reduced barriers to crossing Morehouse, enhance safety for active transport and pedestrians, and create a connection with the stadium. But of those people who were opposed, most common themes included concern about congestion increasing due to the slip lane removal and additional traffic light phasing if it was to be changed, raised speed hump causing delays for emergency vehicles and potentially damaging vehicles or the perception of damaging vehicles, and sentiment that speed humps weren't appropriate for this sort of intersection. But it's also worth noting that while both opposing organisations were against the speed hump specifically, they indicated support for the staggered crossing. ARDA also submitted and provided their own mini survey that they did with students. The results are shown in the submission tables, but for those listening, they reported that out of 350 students that engaged with them on the Morehouse, Barbados, Waltham intersection, 86 were in favour and 86% were in favour and 14% were opposed. And out of the Morehouse, Madras Gasson intersection, 83% was in favour and 17% was opposed. We analysed the results by travel mode. So we asked submitters what their most frequent type of travel was, and they were only able to select one option. And we also asked for their most frequent type of travel. So out of those who cycled, bused and walked, they were the most supportive of the proposal. Those who drove, especially daily, were mostly opposed. But of note, those who drove at least once a week or more were more split in their preference. And the same was consistent for the Morehouse, Barbados, Waltham intersection, except those who drove, especially daily, were opposed, whereas drivers were a lot more split with this intersection. We also asked age demographics because this is a metro significance project, and across both projects, those who were 34 or younger were more likely to support the proposal, whereas those who were over 35 were likely to be split in their preference. In terms of the thematic analysis, the main three themes that people liked were the staggered signalised crossing, the speed humps, and improving the outcome of improving safety of pedestrians, whereas people didn't like speed humps, potential congestion, removing the slip lane, or feeling like money could be spent elsewhere. Of note, those who mentioned that they were specifically against speed humps, 32 submitters were specifically had mentioned that they were opposed to the plan overall. 12 people were somewhat supportive, and one didn't know, wasn't sure. For Morehouse, Madras Gasson, the same kind of breakdown. So out of those who mentioned that they were opposed to speed humps, 45 people had specifically mentioned that they were opposed to the plan overall, whereas 9 had said that they were somewhat supportive of the plan overall. For those who mentioned that they were opposed to the slip lane removal, 11 people were opposed to the plan overall, and 13 people were somewhat supportive of the plan overall. And out of those who responded to concern about congestion, 21 people were opposed to the plan overall, and 5 were opposed to, somewhat supportive of the plan overall.
Thanks. So following the consultation and the feedback received during that consultation, we looked at an alternate plan for the Gasson Madras Morehouse intersection that retained the left turn slip lane from Morehouse into Madras, and using again a zebra crossing, so it's similar to the south side. We would put it on a platform. There's just currently some services where we would normally locate the speed hump, so it just worked out better to have the zebra crossing on the platform at that location. And so it would provide some priority for people crossing the slip lane, and to do it safely with the traffic calming. But the only thing that the scheme doesn't give is the increase in the size of the island. So currently the island's around 9 square meters, so you could probably fit about 6 to 8 people on that island, excluding any wheelchairs and prams. So it is still quite small, and that, I guess, is why staff is still recommending the slip lane removal, to give the big waiting area on the corner rather than option B. But there will be staff recommendations available if elected members wanted to vote for option B rather than staff recommendation. Over to you.
Thank you, really like what you've done with the Morehouse Madras Gasson. I think it's opening with option B for me, because if you're looking at it on the east side, that will be the fast food access and Washington Skate Park. So you've actually changed that whole intersection to make that east side crossing a lot safer, which will take pressure off that northwest side, that corners. The traffic volume in there in 5 o'clock of the afternoon traffic is huge. I think it's just going to make a headache to take that turn out and make it signalised, because it's going to back up to where we have a problem with the overbridge, where we've got signs at the top of that overbridge telling people to slow down, etc. And they hardly ever do, but they try. Well, we try. But I really do like what you've done with the Wolf and Barbados Morehouse. I think it really is overdue, and I totally support that. But for me, it's option B for the Gaston Street. Thank you.
Aaron, just on the submissions, how come none of the emergency services are there, or, and obviously the buses didn't because it doesn't affect them. I don't think there's no bus routes use any of those corners, is there?
So there is buses that turn into Madras Street. We did pre-engagement with ECAN and closed out their concerns prior to going to formal consultation. So they were comfortable with what we were presenting for consultation before we went out, but emergency services I'll hand over.
So on the buses, they're happy with it, on Tim's point, an extension of time, that their routes will be slower?
So I'll hand over to Lachlan to talk about the modelling.
So I guess in just a general sense, to talk about what we modelled, we looked at 2 peak periods, the morning and afternoon peaks, using a package called Sidra. I guess in general, the main impact is on the left turn movement, because you're going from a give way control to running them through the signals. So, there's a natural kind of increase in that sense. There's also a requirement that left turning traffic would give way to pedestrians when they're using the crossing. So that element comes into it as well. Modelling indicates that it's not going to lead to a massive increase in those queue lengths, like running all the way back to way down past Manchester Street and so on. On average, those queues would be able to be contained within the left turning lane that we have at the moment. The primary issue is really in the PMP, but there will be times at which that predicting that queue would exceed that available space, but on average that's not the case. So in terms of the impact on buses, when you make a change like this, signal timings change because you've got different pressures and certain movements need more time which weren't previously. So some of the time that we would get that gets given to the right turn movement from Savon to Madras, which is the one that bus makes, it's a little less time in terms of our signals. So there is a slight increase in delay for that movement, which is yes.
In terms of emergency services, so we extended an invite to emergency services prior to consultation, and when consultation went live, we heard nothing from emergency services, notably St John's, Fiends and New Zealand Police.
So do you think that's good enough?
It's
fallen on deaf ears every other time.
So the only vertical elements in this proposal are the small speed humps on the approach to the zebra crossings. There isn't any vertical on the main traffic lanes, which we have done recently. But for this one, it really is just focused around those pedestrian conflict points. And they're the standard 75 mil speed humps, so they're not any kind of sharp platform like we've got in other crossing locations as well. So we have been taking on board that feedback and trying to smooth them out, but still get that effect where we really need it.
I'll just back up the bus a little bit on that, following on from Aaron and with what you said. So talking about the slip lane on the northwest corner of the Madras and Morehouse, did I understand that you engaged with ECAN on the consultation document, but the consultation document didn't have the slip lane in it because you removed it?
Correct, so I guess at the worst case, it's, the worst case situation was discussed with ECAM prior to consultation, so they'd be aware of option B in that we can retain the slip lane and prioritise the bus.
Okay, so that's the bit I just wanted some clarity on. So they gave you some feedback in retaining the slip lane with a slight raised pedestrian crossing.
No, sorry, the only thing they've provided feedback on was the removal of the left turn lane and it be the slip lane and it being signal
So
lane.
is there some merit in understanding what their position is with reintroducing the slip lane with that pedestrian crossing, as I understand, because the buses do go around that corner with a raised platform on it?
I can talk to them today before council tomorrow.
I think that would be helpful. Thank you.
Sarah?
Thanks. I'm just looking at a few bits and pieces here. We're predominantly doing this because there's a lack of pedestrian access and lots of students and others in the area. And that's been an issue for a long time. And so it's an accessibility thing rather than necessarily a safety thing. If it was a safety thing, I'm assuming given previous upgrades to large intersections, there'd be, either closure of more closure of slip lanes, raised platforms, all of those kind of things. So this is kind of like a bare minimum because we're just doing accessibility, isn't it? Is this kind of how you'd
I guess it's a bit of both, and I guess it's a bit of progress over perfection. Slip lanes aren't that great for people who are walking, but we've tried to make the ones on the south side as safe as possible with the traffic calming. I think the biggest concern for staff on the northwest corner is just the size of the island and not being able to hold people. And I guess when, it's not the main factor by any means, but if when people are going to be going to the stadium, even like at the current one, people drip feed in, but when everyone leaves the stadium en masse, that actually you get big numbers possibly at that location. And even, the biggest number we saw in one kind of block was about 6 people, and it kind of was comfortable just, but as numbers continue to increase, holding people on that island across both east, west and north, south means it does possibly become a capacity issue down the line. So yes, it would possibly be the best outcome for the intersection is to remove all the slip lanes, but we're really just wanting to target the one that's the real problem on that northwest corner.
Oh yeah, thanks. Just a follow up from that in relation to the gas on address Morehouse, recognising that it's number 23 on the ranked intersections. And following up on the safety issue, do we have evidence and numbers around the accidents that are pedestrian accidents on slip lanes, on that particular slip lane, or even on slip lanes across the city, as opposed to intersection accidents in general?
So we've included it in the report. There hasn't been any reported crashes involving pedestrians on the slip lanes at those intersections. The 23 kind of takes into consideration the whole intersection. I guess, we've installed the red light camera was installed there a few years ago, and we've included it in the report that actually it's had a neutral effect on safety. It hasn't addressed the red light running problem that's the main factor of the crashes that are still occurring. In terms of pedestrian crashes, there hasn't been any at either. There was a fatal cycle accident at Barbados, which probably has brought it up to where it's sitting at number 7.
Thank you.
Mark, please.
Following on again, that northwest slip lane, would it be feasible to, rather than close that and do option B, on weekdays when there are large crowds coming from the stadium, to temporary traffic management close that slip lane so that capacity?
Through the chair, the exact details of the traffic management plans are still being finalised. We've actually got a meeting tomorrow with Benjamin Ahi, and it's their traffic management plan to own. So we just collaborate with them to help them address the issues and confirm what traffic management is needed. So it is something we raise with them. But the way the traffic management plans are looking as well, it's almost going to be 3 levels of traffic management plan. And I think it's only going to be the largest event size where traffic management is going to be really pushed out that far. For your smaller events, it's probably not practicable to put traffic management all the way out to Moorhouse Avenue. Yet the pedestrian impacts of those events are still going to be quite big. So there's still going to be lots of pedestrians, or an increased number of pedestrians using that intersection.
Yeah, so just on that, and it's good that you're meeting with them, and we've planned all our streets without knowing which way people are coming from and how they're going to go to the stadium. We made a model, but we've never asked the public. Have we asked VO, because they know where everyone comes from, because they had the data, because I asked them, and they generally know how most people get to all the different sorts of events. So they would have a model. Have we ever looked at their model of where they think people are going to come from to events and how they're going to get there?
So through the chair, a piece of work has been pulled together that we are aware of that does show the likely directions that people are going to come from. And the problem with this is it's all based on best guesses and models. So even when the traffic management plans are in place, and I apologise, probably going a little bit off topic, but once the traffic management plans are in place, there's still going to be lots of learning and lots of changes to those traffic management plans for that first year. Because yeah, we can model it, we can predict where people are going to come from, but how people actually behave on the day is probably going to be quite different to that. So we will adapt as we go.
Part of that comes down to what I mean, you can look at an All Black game, you can see where all the tickets for the last 10 years have been bought all around the city. We know where all the accommodation is, so you can get pretty accurate where they're going to come from. The interruptions to that come from people rat running, because they'll look at one route and they'll go, oh, that's not going to work. And we might have closed it off, so then we create all these other problems. But have we looked at all of the data from VO on how they believe people are going to get from the stadium?
Through the chair we have, and that's part of the traffic management plan that's going to get
a presentation on that, because it'll be good for us to know as well as we're making our decisions.
So through the chair, I think there is actually an action in Infield Council for myself and somebody else to come and talk to you on this.
Oh, that'd be really good. Yeah.
Thank you.
Because our concerns might be all.
Thank you, Aaron. Well, Kelly.
Yeah, just when you do maps like this, could you put a little compass on it so I know which intersection, which direction is east, west, and
the city is north.
Yeah, no, it's more the compass.
I think you live on the other side of
Because you're talking about the east side or the west side, and tiny. I really like.
It's a northwest city.
I really like the intention for the end of Barbados Street. My preference would be for B for the Madras corner. And the other thing is, I'd encourage you to persist with hearing from St John and people like that. I know there's intersection improvements planned for Burwood Road, Marahau, and obviously, I don't know whether you've seen ambulances driving incredibly slowly. Speed humps is one of the possibilities for that Burwood Marahau intersection, and that could be problematic. So it's really important for us to hear from people like that.
Through the chair, that's something we can pursue. Just in addition to what Gemma was talking about earlier with these traffic calming devices we're using here, they're really only there to catch people out who are going to be going too fast anyway. Because if you look at where they're all located on the approach to a give way on a slip lane anyway. Yeah. Anybody driving sensibly should be slowing down anyway. And the speed humps, and yes, we're putting in the zebra crossings there, so they should be slowing down a few meters fast. But to your everyday road user, they're not going to make you slow down. You already should be going that speed. And for your emergency services, they should already be going that speed because they know there's a give way in a slip lane. It's more for those people.
I get that. It's just I'm talking about the when spinal patients have been taken to Burwood Hospital, for instance, the ambulances travel incredibly slow, and yeah, it could be problematic in that particular area. Yeah, it's more about that. But yeah. Cool. No question.
Oh, yes, sorry.
Just with regards to events, the Barbados intersection will be as important as Madras, because the stadium has two exits, one on Barbados and one on Madras. And if you're getting to that, as it has historically, that will start to kind of get less as they get further away. But on Madras, now that you've put the new crossing there, it'll be on both sides, and I'd imagine it'll be more on the east side than the west side, because that's the side that they're actually travelling on from the, if they're not going to town to go to the restaurant, then that's the side they'll be travelling on, so. It's the seaside.
When we do the modelling, who does it? Do we do it or just we get someone to do it?
So for this one, we did it in-house. If it's kind of like a big strategic model, we generally go out.
And is it the same modelling that we used for when we got rid of the slip lane at Curtletts Road, Waimari Road and Shirley Road, because they do have backups there on all three of those?
So that was strategic modelling, that was done externally. This is really kind of intersection focused modelling.
Because the man who did the modelling, if it was, he needs to go out and see if his modelling is right, and I don't think it is. So what I'm getting at is option B, and I'm more from option B than anything else. But
So that's
we'll
there for you
wait till
to-
tomorrow.
Yeah, so I'll have the recommendations with governance team today for that.
Okay, thank you very much.
We also have historic kind of crowd movement from Jade Stadium or Amo Stadium, or whatever you want to call it.
So is it from a level of service this comes from? Like, where's the seed of this come from? Does it come from the public, a councillor, us? Where?
Yeah, so I guess this one in particular, gas and Madras, has been on the books for quite a long time. It just has never moved. I think some of the options that were looked at were quite expensive, whereas we've tried to do the bare minimum, like get as much as we can for the lowest cost we can. Because removing the slip lanes on the southern side as well would have been quite a significant cost. But also we are aware of the ongoing issue between students around here not wanting to necessarily use the formal crossing points. And you know, we were all young once. But I think
Tell me about it.
so it's for this one, it's just been and we knew that the stadium was coming, we knew that project 8011 was there, and through that feedback we had consultation submissions around how difficult it is to use these intersections from a person walking, cycling, scooting perspective. So these ones have come from a wee way.
Both of these intersections, both on the eastern side, haven't got any pedestrian crossing at the moment at all.
No.
Shows you how much notice I take when I drive. So that's, and you're right, it will need it there. So it's not going to make any difference to the movement of cars because they're going to be stopped anyway. It just gives you
It just gives a better level of service for people walking.
okay. No, good. Thank you very much for your presentation. It's good.
Thanks.
Adios. Of course I have. Ye of little faith.
Very quickly.
Right, that concludes our public session. We'll now move into public excluded, just